Hey guys, welcome back to Horse 2 Cinema. And today I'm going to be reviewing Alpha. This movie was directed by the French filmmaker Julia Ducournau. This film is about the titular Alpha, a troubled 13-year-old who lives with her single mom, and their world collapses the day that she returns from school with a tattoo on her arm. So Julia Ducournau is a filmmaker I really love. I really loved her first film, Raw, which I think came out in like 2017 or somewhere, maybe 2016 thereabouts. And then I was just absolutely knocked out by her 2021 film, Titane. It's my favorite film of that year. It's the one about the girl who fucks the car, but it actually turns into this really like unexpectedly tender drama about unconditional love. It's fantastic. I love how she kind of is able to use body horror and the language of like really extreme cinema to make these really kind of like down to earth dramas around that. So I've been excited to see what she's going to do next ever since I saw Titan. I heard that she was doing a film called Alpha for a while. It was kind of in development. I believe she did this with Neon again. And it debuted at Cannes last year, 2025. And I remember hearing mixed to mostly negative reviews at Cannes. And she's a filmmaker that's always going to elicit negative reactions from a certain kind of critic, the kind of critic that just doesn't want to see gross shit in their movies. But Titane famously won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, so at least the jury liked it enough to grant it that. Big step for a body horror movie, cinema that's sort of that extreme to win an award that prestigious. So the reviews being a little bit more mixed did have me a little bit nervous. And I think you always have to take Cannes reviews with a grain of salt. I think there's a much higher correlation of you liking the filmmaker and liking their films versus whether or not their movie got reviewed well by just general audiences at Cannes and you liking their films. But as we've gotten closer to its actual like very limited release that it has right now, I've heard people, that I'm closer to and kind of trust more on film opinions say things that did give me pause. One critic I really like on Letterboxd said that both Titane and Alpha sort of have this edgelord quality to them, where he kind of feels like Julia Ducournau is trying to do, she's like trying to be a shock poet, and that she doesn't really necessarily achieve anything out of that. And I have to say, I really disagree with that characterization of her. I think that she is far too earnest to be a shock poet. So as an example, she always tells this story when she's like in interviews and stuff about how when she was a kid, her parents left her home alone one time, and she turned on the TV and watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at like age 7 or something like that. And she says that like she found the sound of the chainsaw soothing. I think that quote really goes to show who she is as a person and how kind of matter of fact she treats horror, body horror, like all this extreme cinema stuff that she's into. I think she doesn't really believe in any of the taboos that we, put around those things. And she just views them as vehicles for artistic expression, for the same kinds of stories that Truffaut or any, Italian neo-realist filmmaker might do. And that's what I love about her. I just love how kind of matter of fact she is about how she approaches this extreme cinema. I just don't think she has the capability to I don't think shock poetry is really something that's of interest to her. And the story of Alpha is really no different. I think it's very similar in how, Raw is it's the coming of age, going off to school. But it's also about, siblings and kind of understanding each other as adults. Titane is about, it's sort of about the roles that we can play in each other's lives and the way that unconditional love can form. In the case of Titane, you have this guy who lost his son a while back and sees this person who we know she's a serial killer. We know that she's not his son. But she's able to, the character is able to break down boundaries of gender and relationships to sort of, transcend that. And she is eventually filling this role of somebody that this character has unconditional love for. I think it's really beautiful. To go a little bit beyond of the plot description that you'll see on Letterboxd or IMDb, Alpha is about a young girl who is kind of, estranged from her mom, or they have a little bit of a rocky relationship at times. And the tattoo that she gets, there's worry that she might have gotten an infection, a bloodborne infection that's going around. And I think it's very clear that this disease is an analogy for AIDS. It's particularly common in the film among drug users. I think there's even a reference to like the queer community at some point. And at the same time, this girl's uncle, the brother of her mom, comes to live with them, and he is a character who's very heavily addicted to drugs, I believe heroin, and he's using all the time with needles, and so it's at a certain point it's pretty clear that he has this infection. So the drama throughout the film is both like did the girl get infected through the tattoo, and as well it's also about the relationship of the girl, the mother, and the uncle, as he is dealing with the consequences of his drug use, the infection, and just kind of his place in their lives. And I was really moved by it, honestly. I think in many ways it's about encountering these issues, drug use, addiction, disease, death, at such a young age, and how you cope with that as a young person. And by the end of the film, it gets to be more about how you as a family member square the love you have for your family member, the desire you have to hold on to them forever, with them suffering with pain in the state that they are. You can think about issues like euthanasia and things like that. I don't want to go too far down that path because I don't want to totally spoil where it goes, but yeah, I ended up being really moved by the drama. I could see the criticism that this does bite off a little bit more than it can chew. I think at times the narrative does feel a little bit disjointed, but because of how moved I was by the end of the film, I really didn't end up caring. The other thing I really want to mention about this film that I loved, and I hope this gets brought up at Oscar time next year, but the practical effects, the makeup effects for this disease are incredible. Essentially what they do is they make all the skin lesions that these people have start to look like marble, basically like the characters are turning into statues. And it's very detailed what they do with this. In the opening credits, they have this transition of basically the camera is surrounded by this like red dust storm, and it goes inside of a crack. Throughout, you see characters coughing and like dust will come out. And at one point, a character is getting attention from a doctor, and they pull off some skin, but it's the rock that comes off, and it's just so textured and detailed. It's honestly, I didn't really know how to feel about it because it's kind of beautiful, but obviously what it's depicting and its analogy to the AIDS crisis is really, it's hard to call something like that beautiful. So it's kind of an uncomfortable position to be in. But once again, I don't think that discomfort is for shock value. I think it's for, I think it's for engagement in the drama. I think you want to be uncomfortable in a story like this. So yeah, they were just unbelievable effects. I hope this gets attention for like best makeup when we reach the Oscars next year. I hope it's possible this film will be forgotten enough by then, but I'm hoping we can at least get like an Ugly Stepsister situation where that film came out, I think, at a similar time last year, was kind of forgotten about. Definitely not like an Academy movie, but they at least, the effects must have been so good that they went back to it and still nominated it. So I'm actually going to give this film 4 stars. That's quite a bit higher than I think most people have been going for this one. It's got like a 3.3 average, but a lot of like 2 and 1 star reviews from people. I think a lot of that is just people who don't like Julia Ducournau. If you don't like Raw, if you don't like Titane, you probably will not. Actually, I'll say you definitely will not like this. But if you do like those films, if you're interested in this kind of body horror cinema, if you're interested in kind of extreme stuff, or even like kind of more grounded art dramas, I think there's a lot to get out of with this. So today's lesson is don't trust the Cannes critics, trust the filmmakers that you like. But that's going to do it for this video. If you like this video, please like it down below, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've got more videos coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.